So for those that don't know me, like my name is Sandro Mancuso. I'm originally from Brazil, moved to the UK 16 years ago, and most of my career was here. I think that what is relevant for this talk in terms of my, let's say, my background is that I was one of the pioneers in software craftsmanship. And I've been very close to people that started that movement in Chicago. I was very early adopter of agile software development and extreme programming. And about 7 years ago, well, I spent most of my career, I've been in the industry for 24 years. Most of it was in consultancy companies. Through consultancies, I ended up working in a very diverse set of projects and clients and stuff. And through my work, through software craftsmanship and XP and quality, we started a company called Codurance that we build software for clients. But what is relevant for this talk is all this focus on quality, testing, craftsmanship, led us naturally to highly technical work. We didn't realize that at the beginning of our company, but a lot of companies were interested to bring this kind of mindset to their organizations, a mindset where they care about quality, testing, craftsmanship, and they wanted to improve their technical debt. And we gradually start doing that kind of work without even knowing. And more recently, we started to package that as software modernization. And the reason we did that is because most of us, I believe that people that are watching this talk, we probably can all recognize that we have technical debt almost everywhere. Even if you start a brand new project, in a few months, you already have a few things that you would like to fix and stuff. And this is even more true for very old systems. Most of the work that we do is for large organizations that have been around for decades. Their systems are 10, 20, 25 years old. And what we find is there is a lot of people that are unhappy because each one of us, we can spot problems, right? Being developers, architects, product owners, sponsors, UX, QA, DevOps, it doesn't matter which role we play, we can see inefficiencies. But what is quite common is that we struggle to make a case. We struggle to say, like for example, how do we convince the business that we should tackle this technical debt or stuff like that? So even though the product owners struggle sometimes to make a business case in order to optimize their process or their systems or remove the waste from the process. So that's when we decided to, okay, maybe there is a way, and we came up with a strategic approach to modernization. So this talk is focused on people that would like to drive changes in their organizations, being CTOs, being developers, architects, product owners, whoever. But you want to drive change, maybe technical change, and how can you go about that? And we would like to decide to share that a little bit with you in how we do that work. So first of all, we need to define what software modernization means, right? So in my view, we say that it's a continuous process of improving strategic systems in order to increase business agility. The reason that this is important because we need to distinguish when you are driving change, it needs to be strategic and it needs to be in the areas that matters. It cannot just, so software modernization cannot be mistaken by your refactorings, your adding tests, because those are part of the development process. As you are evolving your system, you should be refactoring, you should be adding your tests. That is just part of the normal delivery process. When you talk about software modernization, we are talking about something bigger, more strategic, where we need to change quite a few things. And I will tackle that. And that's why it makes so difficult to make a business case for that, or to understand how we start, who we should get involved. And so that's what I'm going to be covering here. So Why do we fail to make a case for it? So we all see inefficiencies. Like we live that every single day. We are in those projects every single day, and we see it. And for us, in our head, again, regardless of which role we play in that project, we see inefficiencies. So why can we not convince someone? Because we cannot keep us saying that they are stupid people, they don't understand. We need to take ownership. For example, if I'm speaking to you and I have an idea and I want you to convince about something, I cannot blame you for not accepting my idea. I should only blame myself. It's like, where am I failing to communicate? If something is so clear to me, is so obvious to me, why am I not able to make someone see the same thing? So the onus is on me to improve that. And as developers, and I will include myself in that category, because that is my main background, I realize that a lot of the times we fail to understand, to relate the technical improvements that we want to business value. I know that we developers, we like to think that we know a lot, and we criticize our managers, think that everyone is stupid except us, right? So, but it's not true. The truth is, like, a lot of us don't have a lot of business acumen. We don't understand business well enough because we cannot do the bridge. We cannot say, hey, we need to change this architecture here, or the technology, or the way that things are done. And we fail to map what is the business value? What is the actual business outcome that we're going to have? Because if you're going to invest in that area, what is the return that we expect? So this is what we need to develop. And we also, when we try to make a case, quite often we focus on a solution. We say we need to adopt microservices. We need to start doing test-driven development. We need to do DevOps. We need well, you can say that DevOps is a culture, it's not something you do, but anyway, you know what I mean. So we go with a solution, but we fail to agree on the problem first, and then discuss possible solutions, right? So, and for the product owners and more business people, this is sometimes even harder because they're not always easy for them to understand all the technical issues, and they also don't have enough depth to make a proper business case. So before I go and start saying how we can have this strategic approach, we need to have some common foundation that we all need to understand before we propose anything. So one of the things is, what are the common business drivers for technical change? So if we are trying to drive change, technical change, what are the drivers? What would be the business benefits that you could place that? And again, those kind of initiatives, they should be aiming to create a long-lasting impact, right? So we should be thinking in something a little bit more strategic, so to justify the investment, right? So let's go through some of them. This is just this is not an exhaustive list. This is just like the things that we see that are more common, and most of the modernization initiatives that we work on, they end up fitting somehow in some of those boxes, sometimes more than one. So sustainable change, innovation, leverage technology, business alignment, people culture, and risk management. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail in each one of them. So for example, sustainable change. So you might be pushing for a change in order to create sustainable change. So I know it's a bit cliche to say that, but there is a saying that is the only constant in software development, or change is the only constant in software development, right? So we know that will be changing. But for example, we might have a lot of inefficiencies in our process. So there is a big lead time from idea to software in production. Or maybe there is a big cost of change. Every time we change something, we need to go through very time-consuming QA process and bug fixing and stuff like that. So, or maybe we'd like to release more often and in a safe way. So technical debt might be impeding us. So all of those things are business. they have a business impact. So when you are proposing a change, so like, is this change that I'm proposing, does it fit in sustainable change? Is it like a way for us to speed up something or to remove some waste from our process? So this is how we need to start thinking as developers or architects or technical people. How do we explain the value of that? That is just one bucket. It can be innovation. We quite often see people, mainly sponsors, saying, "Oh, it's very difficult for us to innovate. Every feature takes too long." And so sometimes, for example, there are many different types of innovations as well. So, for example, uh, if you are in a business that you need to iterate fast in a very lean startup approach, you need to push a feature. You don't know necessarily who your clients are. You need to experiment. You need to push something out, collect some data, inspect and adapt, right? So push again. So in order to work in that frequency, pushing stuff, collecting data, reevaluating, push again and stuff, you need to architect your systems in a way that can support that. Your architecture needs to support the way that you want to experiment or innovate. But there might be like in a more design thinking or in a more stable system where you have multiple clients already, you can do some analysis with them and understand what they want. And when you release a feature, it needs to be more stable because you are more precise. This feature already has demand. We are not just experimenting randomly. No, we already did some user research, and every time that we release, it goes straight live with a lot of people using. Again, the way that you design your system, the way that you architect your systems needs to support that. So in order to support those different ways of working and innovating, you may need to rearrange your systems to support that, right? So I'm just giving you examples of how you propose to fix some things to the business, right? So leveraging technology. So some people are still using data centers, or they spend a long time trying to maintain their own hardware or escalation. So maybe you can leverage the cloud, for example. Of course, if you are at that stage, you are a bit late to the party, right? So, but again, so this is a matter of using some certain frameworks or even like integrating with some platform as a service. So you are leveraging technology to speed up your process and reduce waste and stuff like that. So again, that may be another drive for modernization. So business alignment. So businesses have goals, but large organizations, they have multiple departments, they have multiple functional areas, or even in a more technical language, multiple bounded contexts, if you like, domain-driven design. So each one of those areas, they have their own goals, they have their own types of inefficiencies, they have their own types of innovations, they have, so isolating them from each other and creating a very well-defined mechanism for communication between them is extremely important for you to provide that evolution of those areas independently. So that's another drive for modernization, making sure that you align your architecture to the design of your organization, right? So one thing that not many people talk about is a lot of companies struggle to hire talent, but not only hiring talent, they struggle to retain talent. So if you're working with a 20-year-old and proprietary technology, certainly we will be struggling to hire and retain talent. So revamping your technology, modernizing technology is not only about certain innovations and stuff, it's also the future of your company in terms of talent, and keeping up to date has that impact. It will attract and retain better professionals. And there's also risk management, right? So we deal with a lot of clients in regulated industries like pharmaceuticals, banks, and healthcare. So there is a lot of things about compliance, security, observability of their systems. You need to design your systems in order to observe them in production. So this is just a few examples of things that we need to understand as developers, as architects, as head of engineering, CTOs, before we push a drive. What are we trying to achieve? So, and then there is the other side. What are the common impediments from the business perspective? There can be many. common ones: lack of time, lack of money, lack of skills, and stuff like that. But some of those things are very, I'm not going into the details of each one, I think they're self-explanatory, but like lack of time and money, they are relative. It might be true that they might not have a big amount of cash to start a brand new initiative, but not always they are clear where they are spending money, the amount of waste that they have in their system. And if that waste was solved, they would have more time and more money to actually do something more useful. So again, that is another way of looking at those things. So what is important here is that, like, when you are thinking about pushing, you need to understand what are the business drives, what are the possible impediments, and you also need to have a few guiding principles in your head before we speak to people and try to convince them. The modernization, I've seen a lot of cases where it went wrong. And so the principles that we like to always have in mind before we come up with a proposal is we need to have a big vision. There's no point, like, it needs to be strategic, but we need to work in small increments, right? So we will not go to someone and say, yeah, we're going to do this for 5 years and maybe you will have some value. No, you will run as a normal agile project, incrementally. It doesn't matter if that is a technical project. It still needs to provide value on every increment. Another big block for this is causing disruption on business as usual tasks. So any modernization program should try to have a minimal, if possible, no disruption into business as usual tasks. It's very difficult to have zero disruption, but we should try to architect that in a way that will have as minimal as possible disruption. Excellence within pragmatic solutions. This is one of my favorite that we've been talking about. I've seen a lot in the craftsmanship world that people were going crazy with quality. Oh no, everything needs to be perfect. And they are losing the pragmatism. And that's when things go wrong. They keep refactoring and changing, architecting and using new technology and stuff, but not within a pragmatic solution. And that is just a pure waste of time. So we should have pragmatic solutions. And within the pragmatic solutions, within that boundary of a pragmatic solution, then you have excellence. But excellence should be constrained by pragmatism, not the other way around. So if it's not broke, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Yeah, don't fix things that if that area of the system is not changing and there's no problems, it doesn't matter if you like the code or not, if you like the architecture or not, or the technology or not. Not changing, not strategic, don't touch it, right? And there is a lot of diminishing returns, right? I think that after some point, keep improving something forever is not a good idea. There is like the 80-20 Pareto's law, like sometimes you just focus on a 20% improvement that will give you an 80% benefit, but try to chase the last 20% may take too long and may not be a good idea. So those are principles. So that is, for me, the foundation that we all need to have before driving large-scale technical changes. And then we actually get to the point of, okay, how do we go about that? Those steps in here are things you probably can do. If you are able to bring everyone to the same room at the right time stuff, you probably will be able to do that in 2 weeks for a very strategic initiative, right? So business alignment followed by technical alignment. Once we have that business alignment, technical alignment, we create a vision. Once you have a vision, we create a strategy to get there, and then we say how we are gonna actually walk along these strategies. So I'm gonna give you a little bit more insights into those things, right? So in terms of business alignment, it's important to bring all the respective people, or the relevant people, sorry, into the room. The sponsors, product owners, architects, whoever you have that are decision makers, representatives of the teams that are going to be working on that. So first of all, localize the change. Some organizations, we've been working with banks and all these larger companies. You will not fix their entire organization, right? So forget it, right? So you need to focus. You need to, okay, I know that you have decades of problems in here, hundreds of systems. We cannot fix that. Let's focus in a few small areas. Let's start from there, and then we evolve. So that's first thing is focus in areas that are important. And then agree with the business. What is the strategic value of that change? Why are we changing that? So then we try to go back to those 6 areas, or even understand, like, is it a strategic value, efficiencies? So what kind of, or experimentation, what are we trying to achieve here? Then you have that business goal. If we invest on that, that's what we are after. Those are the things that we would like to achieve as a return on investment. So there is an alignment here. There is an alignment of which areas you're going to be focusing on and what kind of return on investment you would expect if you actually went for that modernization approach. So then, when you run those workshops, there are a few things that you should focus on. Like, what are the main features that the system has? Because again, you cannot refactor everything. So focus on what is core. What are the pain points? What are the desired improvements? And the thing that is fascinating about, I'll go for these 3 first. I'll talk about the path to production separately. But these 3, running those workshops, we discovered that you can have people that have been working on the same systems or the same area for years. But when you bring them, let's say like the developers, architects, PPOs, all the different people that are important in that area, when you talk about main features, pain points, and desired improvements, they have a very different view because they see the same systems from a different perspective. And that's why it's so difficult to align them, because when you speak with them individually, they have different priorities, they have different pains, different desires, right? So even the features that they consider major features are also different because it impacts them more than others. So this initial workshop of defining that scope, what are the real features here, what is really important, pain points and stuff, already serves to align the people at a business level. And then one of our favorite exercises is what we call value stream mapping, right? So this is a famous workshop. It was not created by us, right? So, but we run that in almost all our engagements. So these maps every single step from an idea to software in production. This is another fascinating exercise that I strongly recommend that you do that. If you don't know how to do it yourself, find someone locally that can help you to run that. And bring those people together, because very rarely, mainly in large organizations, you find one person that can see, that understand the entire flow. When we were doing that, so at the beginning, like from an idea, all the POs and business people, they were all over it. Oh, that's how we work. We have these conversations. We put in that in the backlog and stuff, but they had no clue what happens in the development cycle, in the QA cycle, in the operation cycle and stuff. As we brought those people together, they were all surprised with the outcome. This is a real outcome we had from one of our clients, and they look at us like, bloody hell, we had no clue that it's so complex to push that feature to production. So yeah, that's why you are all complaining, but you complain from different inefficiencies. This is the full picture. And here you can analyze, I don't expect that you read all those post-its, by the way, but here, what you analyze is that it's not a straight line from idea to production. There are loads of branches and a lot of times where work goes backwards. You find a bug or you find a problem and then work goes backwards in the stream. So all of that creates business alignment, because what you are doing, you are highlighting where the real issues are. And one thing that you also need to take into account before you push your proposals is what do we have in the future, right? So what do we have in our portfolio, right? What do we have in our milestones, or what do we want to achieve in the next few months and backlog and stuff? So you need to know, because you might have some deadlines, you might have some commitments or something like that, a client feature that you promised or whatever, right? So you need to take that into account, because that cannot stop. Or if you do something, you need to know what's going to be impacted, right? And then tailor your approach to impact one thing, but not the other, let's say. Another thing, deadlines, so constraints that I call. There are some constraints that are movable constraints, there are made up constraints, and there are things that are constraints that you cannot do anything about. External regulations, certifications, things that come from outside. You need to suck it up, right? You know what, like that was imposed from outside, you need to comply, period. So stop crying. Let's create an approach that will deal with that. but we will take as a constraint. And there might be some organizational constraints that might be too big of an issue for us to tackle. So we say, you know what, this constraint in the organization, we will take as a immovable constraint. So our strategy will factor that in. And others, you will fight to remove those constraints, right? But it's important to have that discussion. And then there is all about the OKRs, KPIs, and business metrics that you might want to take into account as well, because you don't want to impact them. In fact, your modernization approach should be tailored in a way that actually would improve those metrics and not impact them negatively, right? So I know that it might sound a bit boring from developers, but again, this is why we fail. Because if we want to drive change, we need to have more business acumen. We need to understand the business. But we don't need to learn on our own. You can just bring all those people in, run those workshops, and get the information from them. And also agree some metrics. I love the Accelerate book. There's a lot of research beyond those metrics. So those are metrics that I normally find very useful. And if you're doing well in those metrics, it will show that we are healthy, right, in a way, right? So how often you deploy to production, lead time, the time it takes from idea to production, mean time to restore, how quickly you fix problems, and how many bugs or issues that you have as you are developing systems. You want to reduce that. So once we have at the business level, there is an alignment. You want to do now in the next sphere, there is the technical alignment, right? So, and again, all those alignments, everyone's still part of. It's not, you do all of those things together. So when it goes to technical alignment, business should be part of it. The PO should be part of it, because everyone needs to see the world from the same perspective, at least at the high level. So here we will understand what is the current architecture. So given what we learned from the business alignment and the problems and pain points and what we would like to improve, then we can use that to focus the technical workshop and say, okay, so given what we want to fix and what is the overall architecture that caters for that area? What are the detailed design? What are we call it a functional mapping, that is the sequence diagram in there. So we take the main features, and if we try to map them, okay, so when you have a main feature, what are the systems or areas that this feature touches, right? So then we try to map what gets impacted and stuff. So then we have at least an understanding of what is the current state of things, and if we need to change some things, we know our scope now. And then we do a very similar thing. Pain points, design improvements, technical constraints, and the risks in modernization as well. So we have a debate about that, because there might be pain points that are different from those different people. Their design improvements, we need to map them. Okay, we want to improve that, but you cannot just say, I want to improve because I don't like Java and I prefer Kotlin or whatever, right? So you want to improve that, great. What benefit would we have? And it cannot just be because I like this thing more than the other. This is why it's important to run those workshops and make them very, how can I say, precise when we are having those discussions and stuff. There are technical constraints as well that we need to treat as constraints. So there are certain things that are not going to change. No, we are not going to change from Azure to AWS or to Google Cloud. So that's been decided. That's out of our scope. Certain technical constraints will remain. So I'm going to speed up. Like, there are many different types of constraints. I think one is very interesting to say is because this is one that we had to deal with very recently, is the difference between multi-instance and multi-tenant. So quite often we talk about microservices, right? So microservices is lovely, it's great. We decouple everything, and we can change one service without impacting the other one, as long as the interface remains the same and so on. Great, right? It scales very well. We are dealing with a very large client, and a very large modernization project, where because of their industry, they cannot be multi-tenant. What does it mean? Each production instance needs to be deployed to satisfy one of their clients, because they are in the healthcare industry. So if one production instance goes down, they will affect one hospital and not the entire American system. You know what I'm saying? So this is a major technical constraint because they have more than 11,000 production instances and 4,000 are on-premise. They're not in the cloud. So we don't have access to the on-premise because they are installed in labs, in highly secure places, which means that this puts a massive constraint in what we can do architecturally. But we need to have that debate. We need to understand what are the real constraints. So we end up, in their case, we end up going for a modular monolith. Everyone say, oh, monolith is bad and stuff. Well, when you have that scenario, if I have Go microservice, imagine how crazy my production environment will be. So having a monolith is much easier to handle all those different instances. It just needs to be modular inside. So once we understand, so we have that alignment, which technology we can use, what are the problems and stuff, now we have enough info to create a technical vision, right? Only at that point, we start, okay, so given what we know now, where we would like to be. And so I call it magical wand, right? So if we had all the time in the world, or all the money in the world, what would be the amazing thing to have? Already knowing that we'll never be there. But we need a direction, we need a place to aim to, or to aim at, right? So for me, a technical vision is a direction. It's not a plan that you're gonna follow one step after another. So the technical vision is, we need to go in that direction. And then we're gonna iterate. And it's not gonna be a straight line. We're gonna go a bit here, and we recalibrate the technical vision. Is this still where we want to be? Is it more to the right, more to the left? And then we keep recalibrating, but you need to have that bigger vision to guide us, at least. You cannot just start doing some random stuff, right? So then, that's when you start talking about architecture, which kind of technology you're gonna have, what kind of testing strategy you're gonna have, how we're gonna have our pipelines or deployment. Are we gonna do continuous deployment? Are we gonna do continuous delivery? Are we gonna all the way? Or we're gonna have up to a point, and then the other point, someone actually will decide when we go live. So that's when we start creating that vision in many different areas, right? So, and it should take into account the business vision and strategy, constraints, both business and technical, all the pain points, everything we discussed before, the vision should be addressing, or at least the major points in the previous things. Once we have that vision, okay, so we know where we are, we know roughly where we'd like to be, but how do we start? Because that vision, we're never gonna be there. And even to get close to that may take years. So that is not good enough just having that direction. We need to have a strategy. And the strategy for me is like, how are you gonna iterate? What are the next steps? So when we're talking about modernization, there is a very simplistic way of looking at modernization. The Gartner reports, again, it's Gartner, they just want to simplify everything that is complex, right? And raise their reports and look smart. But like they talk about, oh, there are different types of modernization. There is rewrite, re-platform, re-architect, refactor, and they have another one that I forgot that didn't make sense to me. So this is a very, very simplistic way. Most of the modernization approach that we had was a hybrid of all of that. There was a bit of refactoring, there was a bit of rewrite, there was a bit of re-architect, there's a bit of re-platform, there is always a mix of those things. So I don't think that this is valuable enough, because it's too simplistic. When you are driving changes like that, this is way too simplistic. So what we were discussing is like, you need to start from somewhere. So you can make your modernization more tailored. There are different types of strategies. For example, one is, there is one area of your business that needs more love. Let's say it's not performing well. Let's say that a system has customer, product, payments and stuff. Let's say the payments area is a bit flaky, it's a bit like unstable, or it's very difficult to add new payment methods. So at that point, you can prioritize functional areas. So look, you know what, this area here will be very important for us in the near future, because we want to go for an omni-channel, right? We want to unify the online sales with the store sales and everything else. So bring all the, so that means that strategically, that area is important and is unstable. So then you can create a modernization that is tailored to that area, and you forget the other areas. You forget the user and product because let's say that in this case, they are stable or they are not going to be changing significantly in the next year or 6 months or whatever, right? So another one can be new features. So for example, you can create a modernization strategy that take into account the new features. We've done that for one of our clients. We said it was in the payment area and say, like, we need to modernize your payment side. But instead of stopping business as usual, why don't we build the new payment method with the vision that we have? So we use a new feature to actually evolve your system. So they had a big monolith and say, let's build the new payment method as a separate service from the monolith. And then we validate all our assumptions. We validate the architecture that we have in our minds and everything else. And if that works well, we start gradually migrating the other payment methods to there. So you can also have that strategy. So one of our clients had a different, we optimized the modernization strategy for a business flow. They had 300 internal users using their systems to provide services to their external clients. But those 300 users were very inefficient, not because they, as people, were inefficient, it's because they had to go to 3 different systems to do their normal tasks, even copying from one screen to another data in order to continue the process, because they went through acquisition, so new systems were brought in and they didn't talk to each other. So the modernization strategy that we took was say, like, let's take this business flow, let's see how they work, and we are going to modernize your systems, re-architect them in order to optimize that business flow. So there are many different ones. I'm not going to go through all of them, but what I'm trying to explain to you all is that when you are pushing, again, driving technical change, you have multiple different strategies, and you can always link that to a business problem, right? So those are just examples. Here is a more technical approach as well. So that was the actual approach to tackle a business problem, and this is more like actual technical strategies as well. Again, I'm not going to go, I don't have enough time to go through all of them, but for example, modular monolith, as I was describing before, this for me is a totally valid approach. We have a case and we are using that and we're very happy with that. Or go to microservices, maybe Strangler Fig. Martin Fowler talked a lot about Strangler Fig, creating a separate branch and then replace and so on until the new one strangles the existing one. There are many, for example, if you have microservices, and you have multiple delivery mechanisms, as Uncle Bob talks about in the clean architecture. Where do you do the flow, the control of the user journeys, for example? Do you do that through the services, or you push that to the delivery mechanisms? Right, so that is important. This is an important distinction. Would I have my delivery mechanisms, for example, maybe the mobile journeys are different from my web journeys. So that makes sense to have separate journeys from controlled by the delivery mechanism, and have your services completely stateless and not even knowing how they're used as part of the journeys. Again, you need to architect for that, right? So modularization for me is key. Regardless if you have a monolith or services, you need to modularize the different parts. If you assemble the modules together and you deploy them together, that's a separate discussion. But having modules that are separate from each other, test from each other, separately built from each other, test from each other and stuff is important, but you might decide to deploy them together if you go for a modular monolith, but you always need some degree of modularization. So reasons, I think it's quite obvious to a lot of developers, but one of the main things for me, you reduce the cognitive load. When you have very well-defined modules, and I'm using the word modules because I don't want to be saying if it's a service, if it's a package, if it's a DLL, or if it's a jar file, or whatever. Modules like conceptual modules, or the full bounded context, there's a group of services potentially. So, but once you have those modules, you reduce your cognitive load. You need, when you focus on that area, you focus on those modules. You just need to worry about keeping the interface of those modules as they are, because only if you change that interface, you impact other modules. If you don't change the interface, chances are you're not going to impact. So again, that helps us to deploy faster, it makes it easier to test, parallelize work, localize change. So modularization for me is key, and we still get that very, very wrong. Because modularization, as I was saying, goes from methods in a class all the way to a group of services. There are many different levels of modularization, right? So, oh yeah, I forgot I had a slide for that. So yeah, so there are many different types of modules, groups of services, libraries, components, and so on and so forth. So we need to have a good degree of design knowledge to be able to get that reasonably right, or if it turns out we're not going to get right, but it should be easy enough to change. So, and then we got implementation strategy. So once we create the alignments with business, technology, we create the vision, we have a strategy where we're going to get. So, okay, now how do we implement that? And then you have multiple options as well. You can potentially separate, you can have a dedicated team tackling those issues. This is a good way for you to not impact business as usual and speed up the modernization work that you need, but has a significant cost. You localize, you are optimizing. You will get things faster, but the knowledge will be localized at that team, right? So a specialized team is just a group of people that are good at automation, a group of people that are good at testing. Again, you gain speed, you can push those changes much faster, but you are also constrained. So those are, I'm not saying here which one is better, I'm just giving you some pros and cons. So, or you can try to unify the backlog. So you have the same team and there is a mix of technical improvements and business features. Again, the knowledge is spread, but things will be a bit slow. Both business and improvements will be slower, right? So again, there are many different ways. Some teams assign 20% of improvements, same problem again, right? Yes, you can keep business as usual going, but your improvement rate will be slow, right? So those are the things that you need to bear in mind. I'm not prescribing one, you need to pick whatever makes sense to you. Whatever you do, a technical project should have business value, should have roadmaps, milestones, demos. If you want to run with Kanban, Scrum, whatever, I don't mind, but you need to run as an agile project. You need to see value, you need to see the increments, you need to be transparent. If you cannot show business value, if you cannot demonstrate things, you need to rethink about what you are doing, because it's always possible to do. So that's a summary of the 5 things that I mentioned. I'm always over time. So there are ways that we are scaling this work. We call it continuous improvement program. So this is a thing that is already working with one of our clients. So in a nutshell, you can have so this is more strategic. This is more like at a portfolio level, right? That you are trying to have a continuous improvement program that will be, as the name says, continuous forever. But the steering group can have different sources of improvements that can be some functional areas or some groups of people and stuff. Those initiatives go through a funnel, the steering group understand the business value of them, and then they decide to prioritize that and which teams are going to work on that. They might create teams just to work on modernization issues, and there are teams that are fully dedicated to the CIP, as we call it, or they might assemble some teams, take an initiative, get it done, and then those people go back to their departments and stuff. So this gives a lot of flexibility to control the amount of work in progress that you have in terms of modernization. I always say that you should not have a big backlog, because the modernization work will change architecture, will change design. So if you have too many of those things happening in parallel, it will be very chaotic, right? So you need to balance that. So, and ultimately, what we want to achieve is to align product and software design. This is a different talk that I have, but we normally, agile organizations, they tend to be very good at, or good enough at product vision. So they have a definition, they have a roadmap, and they have milestones, always in terms of features, in terms of business value. So the one in beige or orange is what normally happens in an agile project. What we don't have is the line in green. That is the technology being aligned to the product design. So as they are talking about product definition, we should have a technical feasibility. Is it even feasible? Should we buy? Should we build? Should we change? So if we understand the roadmap as it's being created, we can understand the impact of the architecture, the kind of architecture we should have to support that roadmap. So the problem that we have today in agile projects is that technology gets involved towards the end. So the business does the product definition, roadmap, milestones, and I call minimum viable increments, but think about user stories or whatever, or epics, and we only get involved in the top items of the backlog and the iterations. This is way too late to do strategic decisions related to technology. So the idea is to align all of that. Anyway, so I'm way over time, so thank you very much. I don't know if you have time for questions or not, but I will be in the panel.
Sandro, tenemos 3-4 minutos para un par de preguntas. Si quieren, la pueden hacer en español, porque Sandro entiende español y él puede contestar levantando la mano, o la escriben ahí en el chat, como quieran.
Yeah. I understand Spanish, I understood what you said, so if I don't understand the question, I will ask and then you translate. So, do you want to, yeah, if someone could read the questions or give me the questions, if we have any?
Ahí Esteban, dale, Esteban hace la pregunta.
Dale. Sí, vos mencionaste, Sandro, que los cambios tienen que ser pequeños, small, pero al mismo tiempo, digamos, el término de modernization es para cosas que no son simple refactoring. La pregunta es, ¿qué tan pequeño pueden ser esos cambios y si hay técnicas distintas, digamos, al simple refactoring? Porque por ahí me imagino que esto tiene más que ver con cambiar una base de datos, un sistema de tareas o cosas más difíciles de cambiar.
So if I understood correctly, the question was, normally the modernization initiatives are big initiatives, but we need to do that incrementally. So the question was how small those increments should be. Is that fair as a summary for the question?
Yeah,
so
how small and what are the techniques for getting
right.
there?
So as I said, for me it should be as we do the normal user stories. For me, I have guidelines. For example, I should never have a user story that is 1/3 bigger than the size of the iteration. So if I'm dealing with 2-week iteration, no user story should be bigger than 3 days, let's say. For the modernization, it's exactly the same. We should be able to break it down. We need to change this database, or we need to for example, if you need to modernize certain screens, you can prioritize. Well, let's start with this screen first. Let's do that one. Let's go to the next one. Or if you are doing some backend database optimization, let's say that there are requests to the database everywhere in the code base. You prioritize and say, okay, let's take this area here. You're going to create a repository or whatever, or a facade or a database infrastructure, but we're just going to take these calls in here and reroute them to our new thing. And in this new thing, we will optimize, we're going to log, and so on and so forth. And then we start planning how many others we're going to reroute to the new thing, and then then we factor the code and remove all the rubbish that we left behind. And you might decide not to go all the way, but you still can demo that if I'm introducing logging. And see what I'm saying? So you can break those things apart as you would break any other feature, business feature. Yeah. I don't have time because otherwise I could give you far more examples and go back into one of these slides if we have them.
Ok, bueno, hay una más, pero ya están esperando personas para la próxima sesión.